we come together. And as always, we thank God we can be here to pray together and to hear God's word in the scriptures. You know, it's funny. It's really funny. But maybe there's no such thing as coincidence. This particular reading wasn't set for September 11th. It's set for the 24th Sunday in Ordinary Time, year A. A, B, and C. Cycles of the readings. And it just so happened that this reading falls on 9/11, when we hear about forgiveness. Coincidence. And yet, what we're called to is to forgive no matter what time of the year. Or as Father Vinny said last night, this is a good reading for Lent, when we're asked to look at ourselves really deeply. So it's good to take the time in ordinariness to do the same thing. We're not only asked to be forgiving certain times of the year. We're asked to be forgiving, in the new terminology, 24/7. I think that's the first time I've ever used that analogy. I'm not up to all this new stuff. I want to share something with you. Words from an English poet, Gerald Manley Hopkins. And I read this morning as I was sitting there, and I said, the world is charged with the grandeur of God. The world is charged with the grandeur of God. The feelings that we have at times of wrath and anger, which we heard the first line of the first reading to the book of Sirach, that's not normal. Maybe for a time when we have been really injured by someone and we feel that, that rage going through us. But if we live with that rage, what are we doing to ourselves? And I give you an example from my own family of birth. And I've said this before, but we have so many, thanks be to God, more people. When I moved here, when I was on the verge of moving here in 1989, I had two aunts who lived in Deerfield. They've since died. In fact, one of them made the habit of wearing it, so every time I put it on, I think of them. And they had a brother who lived in Tampa that they hadn't spoken to in 25 years. And every time they mentioned Henry's name, a look came on their face that was not nice. So when I decided, when God pushed me here instead of going to Orlando, of course it was 93 degrees, 11 o'clock at night in Orlando in July, I said. Anyway, so I told them when I came to visit, I said, I'm going to be moving here in October, and I've got to visit my uncle, the man you don't speak to. I said, because you have deprived, and I love these two women as my mother, because Mom died in 73. I said, you've deprived my sister and me of knowing my uncle and my cousins. And my sister and I went up to Vero, where he was living at the time, and we brought them back together again. In fact, one uncle died, the one that they were so vehemently against, September 10th, 2001. And this is just the point of, as we're told, life is short. We read in the Psalm, which Psalm is it, Father, that life is 70 or 80 years? The exact number I don't remember. You know, and we look at this and we say to ourselves, for what? What are we carrying grudges for? What are we not letting that love of God come through? Are we afraid that if people see that we're loving, that we're going to be vulnerable? When Jesus was brought in front of the rulers, when he was, after he had the Last Supper, he just stayed there and didn't show any anger. And if we're asked to walk in the footsteps of Jesus of Nazareth, there was no wrath, there was no anger. And we can't limit the manner in which we love. Be it a partner, a family member, a husband, a wife, an associate. We can't limit. God forgives us. We're the ones with the long memories. If we confess, as we do before every liturgy, and if we have to confess more than that to a minister, to a priest, if we feel that's what we need, when we present those faults, God's forgiven them. We're the ones who beat ourselves up. But God is tender and compassionate. That's what the Psalm said. And so many times we pick and choose what we're going to hear, what God says. So at the beginning of the liturgy this morning, the first word the risen Christ said on that first Easter Sunday night, when the apostles were in the room with the doors locked because they were scared stiff, Jesus came and said, peace. Peace be with you. As God has sent me, so I send you. Yeah, as a country, as a nation, as people of the community of nations, everything changed 10 years ago. But we have to be open. We have to be forgiving. We have to be loving. There are fanatical people in every religious denomination. There are fanatical people who are Catholic, who I wouldn't even want to be in the same room with because they have so much hate. There are fanatical people who are Jews, who won't look at somebody who isn't of their own class. And yeah, there are fanatical Muslims, no question. And we have to be fanatical Christians, because this is what we're called to be people who love, to be people who walk in the footsteps of that carpenter from Nazareth. Francis says, preach the gospel and use words when necessary. Pray for me. May God bless us and keep us. May God's face shine upon us and give us peace.